What will music be like in 2050? That's the big question I'm asking on season 3 of the Drown in Sound podcast. And to kick things off, I'm going to speak to someone who is a real expert in inequality and community building. He is Matt Griffiths from Youth Music, who are an organisation in the UK who put up to about £10 million a year into grants to support everything from youth clubs through to helping people get their way into the industry. And they work a lot with grassroots music. And there's nothing more grassroots than working with children as young as 0 to 5. So I really wanted to start this series by looking at right from the very start in music, whereabouts the foundational fractures are. Because if we're going to get to 2050 and things are going to be good, then we need to overcome the challenges. We need to have a generation of people who are excited about music, who know that music is something for them and not just for the well-off. And I am really thrilled that Matt shared quite a lot of his expertise and a lot of the studies that they've worked on. In this conversation, we talk about the UK, we talk a little bit about how we can impact governments, some of the things that companies and corporations maybe could consider. So as this year of open research continues, you will hear a lot more voices of experts like this. So this is Matt Griffiths from Youth Music. Throwing everyone in the deep end, and this is the first interview for this series about what music would be like in 2050. As someone obviously once said, I believe the children are our future. What do you think the future will be like for the children now in 25 years, or the children of 25 years time? What do you think the music world will be like?
Okay, so like framing it from the situation for young people, I'm an optimist, I think and I hope and I really want things to get better, but a kind of doom scenario is that music for young people becomes increasingly inaccessible and it becomes something increasingly for the posh and the privileged, to be honest. And what I see now is a situation where, because of various factors, cost of living, the economic situation, the social fabric and the social situation for young people, spaces where they make music, where they make lots of music, youth clubs, community youth spaces, community recording studios, mental health units, youth offending institutions are all under real pressure. And we're hearing on a kind of daily basis about, organizations we support at risk of closure. So in a way, for me, if we looked at that looking ahead, if we don't do something significant and bold, this situation could get really worse. And music becomes something that you can only take part in if you've got money and if your circumstances mean you've got easy access. But those facing the biggest barriers, which is what youth music's all about, don't get the opportunity. So I think that's fundamentally where I am, a kind of doom scenario and associated matters, music education. Yes, sure, it'll happen in private schools, and private schools have great music departments, and it's a real sell for young people and a sell for their parents and carers. But in the meantime, the state system is really struggling. And, there's a statutory responsibility to deliver music in the curriculum, but it's not really being enforced. So then a huge percentage of the population are kind of losing out. And then for those, who look at making a living in some way on or off stage, the threat of AI, not just musically and things musically becoming particularly kind of really cold and plastic. But I think financially, our role at Youth Music is to help young people, help marginalized young people make and monetize music. And if they're unable to get any financial recognition from the music that they create that's then nicked by AI, that is just, for me, fundamentally wrong. I see the benefits of AI in terms of assistive technology, particularly for self-employed young people who use it in lots of ways. But in terms of it being used generatively, your music could just be nicked,
I've been discussing it quite a lot with people as non-consensual AI. Because
Exactly.
unless you've consented to your work being used in the training data to generate work for other people, one of the biggest challenges is a lot of the sound libraries that they're training on have been using sound alikes, is one of the things that a few people that have dug into things are predicting, because we can't know, because you can't actually ask the AI any questions. It's a bit like being at border control or something. You're only allowed to say
Right.
yes or no, and Yes,
right.
thank you. The AI is not going to tell you the information of its recipe, even though it's, I don't know, it's not like it's KFC special sauce or something. It's our data that they've got. Um,
Right,
so in
right.
terms of young people that you work with now and the organization has worked with over the last 25 years,
Yeah.
what are some of the challenges that we need to unpick, either as governments or corporations? Because obviously we're seeing the likes of Live Nation and Spotify making, I would say, excessive profits. You don't need to agree or disagree with that, but we're not seeing the so-called trickle down
Mhm.
to where the money needs to be. So, what are some of the challenges, and what are some of maybe the solutions you've seen in this country or across the world?
So what I see, certainly UK-wise, from a youth music point of view, and indeed globally, is a situation where the positive about the power of music in people's lives, socially, personally, musically, how it makes them feel, and how it adds to the economy of the UK and the world is undisputed. You know, it's absolutely well known. Um, and good money is being made in certain aspects of the industry. But as you say, it's not getting to the very community rooted projects that youth music's interested in. So what we're seeing as a grant maker. We give out grants totaling about 10 million a year to about 350 organizations and indeed to about 250 individual young creatives. The demand on our funds is increasing exponentially. So we're having to turn down 83% of applications.
Wow.
So we're only saying yes to 17%, and that's unprecedented. So really, our 10 million, you could quadruple that to 40 million, and then we could really do something.
And
So,
so
so
that the
yeah.
listeners can understand a little bit more, what are some of the types of projects where the money kind of flows to and the benefit it has for the community?
Yeah, so we've got priority areas in terms of what we fund. So things like disabled young people facing barriers, work in the youth justice system, and indeed early years work for very, very young children. So we prioritize the type of young people we want our money to go to. And then we have a regional balancing process as well, which gives an equitable approach in terms of getting to the regions and nations of the UK in most need. And we calculate
I
all that
guess
data.
sorry to interrupt. I guess
Yeah.
I'm thinking, what does that kind of look like? Is that equipment? Is that um, money towards their train tickets? Money towards their rehearsal rooms? Is it subsidizing the cost of rehearsals? I guess maybe it's all of those things.
Yeah, so if it's funding one of those organizations, it'll be helping pay the staff, the youth workers, the musicians to run the sessions on a weekly, twice weekly basis. It will be helping for those young people to get there in terms of transport. There is an element of instruments in that as well, and money to really look at, you know, the impact and outcome of all this work, so organizations can reflect on really what's the best thing to do and taking a really kind of youth voice approach. So, as Sound of the Next Generation said last year in our big report, music is young people's top favorite thing. It's their top love.
Overtook
When
gaming, didn't it?
it did, that's right. In 2019, it was joint with gaming. So the love is really, really high, and what young people know and want to do in music is really clear. So we allow resource to really talk with young people to inform the programs that happen. So that could look like a youth club, you know, classic youth service work. That could look like a special school. It could look like a work in a youth offending institution as well. Anywhere where music can make a particular difference, and that's really why youth music exists. So this massive demand is going through the roof. We're having to turn down more. And government-wise, I think definitely since this new government have come in, that they're saying and talking the right noises, if you know what I mean.
Mm.
But we need that to be enacted now with like really firm and clear policies, because you know, of course, it's a situation now, but it's also the next generation.
I guess for slightly more global audience might be listening, Keir Starmer, the new Prime Minister in the
Yeah,
UK, he was a musician. Did he play, was it the cello or the violin?
yeah. I think he
And he
played
went
the
to
flute.
flute and he went to music school with Fatboy Slim, I think is the story that keeps getting
Yeah, that's floating around.
Yeah, I don't know
And
to
I
what
think,
I think they may have just been in the same school or something. I don't know whether he was his.
yeah, I
um,
think he went to like the Junior Guildhall School of Music, the
mm,
Saturday morning sort of service for really talented young people. So, and when he's spoken, he talks very personally about this, but it's like backing this up, particularly for this grassroots youth spaces that really need that support. So I guess that's what we're looking for. And obviously we're talking to them about it. And, we've got a big history at working with government since youth music started.
Well, first of all, let me thank God, because if a jazz band winning the Mercury Prize doesn't make you believe in God, I don't know what will. You hear what I'm saying, fam? And then most importantly, really, Ezra Collective represents something very special because we met in a youth club. Do you hear what I'm saying? And this moment that we're celebrating right here is testimony to good, special people putting time and effort into young people to play music. Do you hear what I'm saying? And right now, this is not just a result for Ezra Collective. This is not just a result for UK Jazz, but this is a special moment for every single organisation across the country ploughing their efforts and time into young people playing music. You hear what I'm saying? So big up Tomorrow's Warriors, big up Connecticut Blocko, big up the Brit School, big up Elam, big up Jubilee Youth, big up Audio Active, big up Emphil Glamour. You hear what I'm saying, fam? Because let me tell you something really, really serious. I'm going to tell you something real. We've got something special in the UK. We've got something special by way of young musicians. So let's continue to support that, you get me? Easy to the world!
I remember being covered in goosebumps when Ezra Collective spoke at the
Yeah.
Mercury Prize, partly because as a working class kid, my mum's a hairdresser, my dad's a painter and decorator. I grew up in a town in the West Country that had no real music scene or pedigree. PJ Harvey was from down the road from me, and that
Yeah.
kind of, to me, felt like I was connected
Yeah.
to the global mycelium of what music is. But I remember going to a youth club, must have been about 13, 14. Some of the lads in my school I knew played drums and guitars and things, and they just started playing music. I remember being able to sit around and just listen to music and talk about music.
Yep.
And that was when I realized that all the time I was spending on my own reading music magazines, I actually had a lot of opinions and things to say. And I think it's hard to quantify. I don't want to use the word radicalizing, but
Mhm.
the sense of like opportunity. And I think it's so difficult for someone that hasn't been through that process, that hasn't been able to just do whatever they want and pay for whatever they want and access whatever they want. Like, obviously now if you want to learn guitar, you can buy a cheap guitar and turn on YouTube and get a guitar lesson. Whereas when I picked up a guitar, it was really confusing. I had a book that didn't really make much sense.
Mhm.
And I sold it pretty quickly to buy a mountain bike because I just wasn't picking it up. And I think it's really difficult for some people now to think about how difficult it was then. But I can't imagine how much more difficult it would be now to do what I've done over the last 25 years. Like when I started Dran Sound, there was no competition on the internet. I could
Mhm.
start a magazine and a million people were reading it within a few years. And I could put gigs on in my local venue and I could send emails to people and say, we've got £150. This band that have just got a single of the week, a melody maker, do they want to come play in our little venue? And I think now, not only would that not be anywhere near enough money to offer someone, but I was able, the venue owner was able to kind of give me a bit of patronage and help me. And in exchange, I built the venue's website and did
Mhm.
research for them. And I guess what I want to say is what you're doing is great, and that's why I wanted to have you on the podcast because
Oh,
I
thank you,
think.
Sean.
But I think what worries me is we talk a lot about growth and opportunities, and
Mhm.
it's always financial and
Yeah.
rarely about the value of community and the deeper roots that you need in order to do things that are extraordinary, exceptional. And as a country that have done things in music that is extraordinary, exceptional, I guess I'm really keen to know what it is that maybe, obviously we had a government for the last 14 years that weren't as interested in arts and culture, but what do you think it will be that would, is it even the government that need to free up the money? Is it corporations? Is it like things like the levy that's coming in? Are these some of the things that might be solutions for kind of the grassroots of music and like
Yeah.
making
So
another version of me and
yeah.
50,000 more of me?
And in a way, probably going further back, another version of me, because, you know, I
Mm,
started out as a drummer, and where did I do that? I was in youth clubs in Cardiff. Do you know what I mean? You know, way back when. So I think financially, it's a combination of both. So we raise money, and we get money from lottery via Arts Council England, Postcode Lottery, music industry partners, etc., etc. So I think there's a sense that the music industry begin to recognise that this is important and coalesce together around a really important cause, which is music and young people. We know where the money's needed. You know, we can tell them straight away because we've got all the data and information. So to build a resource of money, a pot that's the industry working together significantly, you know, around a single really important cause, that'll really impress the government, because they'll go, okay, so you're putting your money where your mouth is. And I think then, actually, over time, there could be increased investment from the government, particularly to reach the targets that we've got to meet all this demand. I love your point about the social and kind of personal well-being side of things. I think for me, fundamentally, that's really, really important. Again, why we exist, but how it makes you feel making music with others in a place, going to a gig with others in a place in your local community. It's just great for the soul, great for your heart, and makes you feel better, helps you find your place in the world in a really, really difficult world. So we hear so many amazing anecdotes and sort of stories from young people and how it's helped change a difficult situation into a positive situation. So of course it's not an either or, but I'm completely with you about that idea that socially in the UK, boy, do we need it. That kind of joy, that sense of community, that kind of bringing things together, like the tribal experiences of making music, going to see music, creating scenes of music where you know where you want to go, where you feel yourself, where you can be yourself, either as an audience member, a gig goer, on stage, off stage. And what we're really interested in is those young people who are making the music now that then can get to the venues. Do you know what I mean? So
mm.
without the people, we're nothing. You know
Yeah,
that one?
exactly.
You know, and that's that's what really, really drives me. And financially, yes. And of course it's both those things. But I think get the social bit right as well as the financial bit, and making sure the growth and any money that does come through goes to the right places and has longevity, you know? And that's my optimism, Sean.
Yeah, I know, and your optimism hopefully is infectious. I guess there's a lot of discussion at the moment about toxic masculinity and mental health crisis, and we hear a lot of people on the far right talk about a lack of social cohesion, whilst also having riots, which I heard quite a few people discussing during the time of the kind of civil unrest in the UK last year, how people came together and it's people like it felt like communities. And we
Yeah.
I don't know why the word community gets overused in the tech world and often just means joining a Discord, but in our local towns and cities, like it seems like community is something that ladies do at tea clubs and people do at the school gates, but not something which, like, to me, the music community, like, I'm part of a global music community. Like, I can
Right.
go to almost any city in the world and there's someone that runs an independent label or venue or record shop, and I'll just drop a quick note saying, "Do you fancy taking me for a beer and telling me about your town or
Yeah.
your city?" And like the I guess my question really is, like, if the government are looking for solutions to growth and cohesion, like, growing connections feels like a far more important thing than growing GDP. Because I think you go out, you meet people, you spend money, you create businesses, all these things. I don't know, is that something that's part of the thinking behind when youth music are asking for more money and more support, or just more kind of attention from the government?
Yeah, all of that completely. Um, and counteracting a situation at the moment that's almost like dismissing diversity inclusion, and I'm
Mm.
thinking of, the thing
Yeah, in America.
yesterday from conflating an air crash with something around EDI. It's absolutely nuts. And I think, UK wise, that complete recognition that society is unequal
Mm.
and many, many people, through no fault of their own, are losing out in the process of music, of making and listening and hearing and going to music. And that's our core purpose, to change that. So, and I think that's, in fairness to the government, they are saying those things, but I think it's sometimes forgotten that actually music communities, communities of young people can help make this change, because of
Mm.
course they're amazing. We see and hear from so many young people who are just the great next gen creatives that we support. And they're finding their way in a kind of DIY way, despite the system, not because of the system.
Mm.
They've got side hustles on. Their progression, it's not a pipeline, Sean. It's almost like flight pathways.
Mm.
It's all sorts of different ways to get on and off stage. And if that system that does exist can be nurtured, can be grown through us, through youth music, I think we could do something really special.
So, one of the themes that I'm going to be exploring throughout this year on the podcast is how the global south can have more of a voice in music, and how different communities which don't really get a look in. I'm curious of any lessons for anyone that's looking at kind of initiatives in different cities and towns around the
Yeah.
world. Are there any things that you feel like youth music have learned that if you were to hand a textbook to someone, these would be some of the key things that you think they should try or do or ask the governments for?
Yeah, definitely. So first off, yes, we get it. Music's amazing. It can do amazing musical and social things. But for people who are carrying out and setting up enterprises in their community, absolutely understand who your community are. Do that work first. Consult, talk, with a lot of humility about what you're thinking of doing, and engage from people in the community. Is that going to work? So there's that big kind of sense of consultation, I think, definitely. I think look at longevity as well. So you can do something shiny, and we see lots of, great shiny things going on, but they don't last long.
Mm.
How you're going to get longevity into your program in partnership with others. And then thirdly, how this is going to be resourced. It's probably going to be a partnership between the youth club, it's going to be with the school, it's going to be with the local venue, a local business. It might be a bigger business, but then the kind of financial model to get it off the ground so that it lasts.
Mm.
And sure, there'll be some recognition for that in terms of like good exposure and publicity, but the primary motivation should be about making that difference to young people. And I say that because I think sometimes we see, and maybe this is the nature of the music industry, it can be so fragmented. There's lots of individual things going on, but they don't stack up to the biggest impact they could possibly be. Now, through youth music, we know the network. You could really grow something together that has legs and
Mm.
lasts long. And that's back to my earlier point about how that would really work for the government. So a few thoughts there, Sean. Is that what you
Yeah,
meant?
yeah, no, that is like that touches on some of it. I can't help but thinking what you would do if you had the money that Spotify gave to the new camp in Barcelona, or that Apple spend on their Grammys parties, or like all these different places where like the salary that the MD
Yeah,
of Universal gets. That there's so much money in music, and the I don't know what the disconnect is, because I think if you were running a biscuit company and you knew that you needed certain ingredients, you would make sure that those farmers can survive and thrive as an industry, so they can provide you with the ingredients you need. And uh, I guess I know that a lot of the music industry is quite short term. So many people are focused
mm,
on week one sales and chart positions. And like, I think the kind of data orientated way streaming has made people think, and a lot of that's quite vanity metric driven, which I can imagine for a lot of young people thinking, my music can't be that good because I've not got the stats to back it up, not realizing there's 130,000 songs released every single day, which is like, I think one of the moments of epiphany for me was just showing people how many emails I got a day. And I was
Yeah.
like, I'm not ignoring you. I'm not gatekeeping. I just literally cannot respond to all of the requests of people asking to be written about. And I think it's similar with, once you understand that there's that much music going on Spotify, it feels a little less depressing to know that there's that much competition. I guess I'm just thinking, the if you 10 times the budget that youth music had, what
Mm.
sort of change do you think it would make?
Mm. Well, there's a kind of urgent change for us. So tackling that success rate and tackling those organizations that are at risk of closure, 25% of our portfolio. Um, we're launching something really soon, actually, called Rescue the Roots, which is exactly this: to build this pot of money, which we can then get out the door
Mm,
really, really quickly. And that would be investment from all sorts of people: government, philanthropists, industry, individual donors, artists. We've got examples of artists who often anonymously give, and the humility in that is amazing, because they're not
mm,
looking for exposure. They recognize that what youth music did and does is very similar to their lived experiences.
mm,
So there's a kind of short-term urgent need, and what we said with Rescue the Roots, we're putting up 1 million. We're putting our money where our mouth is. We'll put up 1 million, which would match from other donations. So, a donor puts in 100,000, we will match that. So that's the short term. And then
mm,
the long term is to build that pot as a significant endowment for young people in music in this country. The thing about the disconnect, yeah, we see it a lot. I think, to sort of sharpen it a little bit, I think there's sometimes that sense that corporate partners, industry partners will go, that's all great, that's all very lovely, but it's not our core role, you know, or that's government's role. So almost like pass the buck to someone
mm.
else. And then government go, but we're looking for industry to significantly do something about this, like the levy thing. So then it gets a bit stuck. And in a way, we work with both sectors, if you like, and can see that opportunity to pull it together. Because I think, back to that earlier point, fundamentally, it's about social change. It's sort of social justice, really. And yes, there's competition in the industry, and heavy, intense competition, but surely we can coalesce around young people and music in the UK,
Yeah,
particularly those who are marginalised or losing out for a whole variety of reasons.
because I don't think it's necessarily, I mean, I don't want to pick on too many people, but
Yeah,
like, there are quite a few artists that are very successful.
yeah,
Someone like Fred again, who seems to be from a dynasty of people from a lot of generational wealth. Taylor Swift's family are generate like 3 generations of bankers, I think I read when I was digging into it.
yeah,
And I don't think it's hard for people to understand when you're worried about every single bill, like when you're working every single hour just to get enough money to go to a show, let alone to perform at a show, and the the losses that some artists are making just to perform at festivals in the hope that they'll get further down the track, and yet there's all this private equity money and people profiting
yeah,
from the festival industry. I guess the inequality of it is something which I really worry. I think about 10 years ago there was a lot of articles about how posh pop was getting.
yeah.
And
Got involved with that. Yeah,
yeah, I think I remember one of the first times I think I must have heard about youth music was around then. But
yeah.
obviously you work with people from, I think, was it 0 to 5 up to 25? Was that
That's
the
right.
kind?
Yeah.
And what do you see as the kind of entry points where people have that epiphany of this is important, like this is unjust, or like I guess for the people at the face of it, they don't need to know that it's unjust. But do you think there's a penny drop that you see with different people?
In terms of young people taking part, do you mean?
Well, I think I guess in terms of both, of like people wanting to be part of music, but then people wanting to understand this needs to be backed and funded, and it's important. Sorry, I realized
Yeah.
I asked 2 questions at the same time without asking
That's
one
that's
correct.
right. Got it. So the epiphany, I think, is often very, very personal. So people who often back our work, whoever they might be, it's really interesting how it'll come back to a story in music that affected them, you know, and that makes the conversation a really great place to start. And then you can explain, and actually, there's all these situations where, you know, young people are having similar moments, but so many aren't. And then you can sketch out whether that's because of their neurodiversity, their disability, because of where they live, because of discrimination they faced. And because you've had the lived experience of the person you're talking to, it really, really resonates. Um, so I think that's quite a positive thing. But then you need more than that from the individual. You need their corporation at all levels, board governance wise, to really back this and make a decision to help fund it.
Mm.
Um, uh, there's never really a kind of opposition to, I don't think this works, Matt. Do you know what I mean? People, they fundamentally kind of get it. But perhaps it's something about, oh, I don't think that's my responsibility or my company's responsibility. But then when you give an example of, you know, the number of young people who've done amazing things, the artists that have come out of youth music funded projects, that turns a light on as well. If you can make it relatable to, you know, the music industry now. You talked about Ezra. I was thinking about English teacher, Little Sims, Celeste. Where were the spaces they did their work, you know? And, you know, a little bit further back, Laura Mavula. And then indeed, Fred again, you know, in fairness, Ali Pali, sold out shows, VIP guest list donations to youth music. And Fred again's team made that happen. And it was all very simple and straightforward. And, you know, there was a financial benefit to us. So I think it's personalized in terms of like the epiphany that people have. But then also, I've always kind of said, like, good diversity is great for diversity of music, you know,
Yeah.
and, you know, loads of people will say that. But that's really important about who gets the chance to take part. What are they writing about? What are the songs they're writing about? What's the lyrics they're writing about? That's a way of self-expression for them that helps with their well-being, and they have something to say. And it's also a banging tune. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And then it just makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end, because you go, that's what we're talking about. And then the industry go, I see what you mean. So for industry partners, they often see it from the point of view of likes, shares, streams, you know, but actually I try and take it back to go, but it starts here. It starts in this youth club, you know, it starts in an early years setting. Do you know what I mean? Where 0 to 5s, you know, we put in over 1 million into that area. And, you know, go and see these projects. And it's extraordinary, you know, about at a very young age, interaction between children and their parents and carers, that sense of community, which is less about attainment. You know, there's this thing going on in early years
Yeah.
that, you know, as soon as you get to the early years setting, an iPad comes out and you're kind of assessed about how you're doing on attainment, hard facts. And it just leaves me cold, you know. I get you need a bit of that, but it's back to that balance about, you know, young people and children feeling really good about themselves, and music does that.
I think it's also finding yourself and your place in the world. And I think that's
Yeah,
really hard to quantify. It's like, as someone was only recently diagnosed with ADHD, I probably found a lot of the ways in which my intelligence was measured and
hmm
the ways in which I was being educated didn't match the type of brain I've got. And it's not exactly a small minority of people that are neurodivergent.
yeah,
We're just getting better at testing people now. Um,
exactly.
and I think that music gave me a lot that the world wasn't shaped to do, and helped me make sense of things in a lyric or in a song or in the types of people I met when I went to shows. And I think that's not something you can quantify on a GDP, or like I'm finding myself really frustrated at the moment listening to a lot of business news,
Yeah.
because it's always about profit and not about anything else that businesses do. And businesses do a lot more than that. And I think the business world would like to talk a lot more about it, because we live in a values based kind of People want to know the kind of the root and the story of anything to really engage and connect to it. And I think that the reason podcasts have taken off, because they do give you that space to have these kind of longer conversations and to really dive in and think more. But I guess I got one last question for you. The last 25 years have seen a lot of technological change.
Mhm.
What are the different challenges that youth music's faced, no longer faces, and what are some of the consistent themes?
In terms of the development of technology.
I guess just in terms of generally, like the organization's been going 25 years, and that's obviously a huge swathe of time. Like I don't know if when you look back at some of the early initiatives, and they might have been about burning CDs, and that's probably not something that's a
Mm,
challenge now. Like,
mm,
I'm
mm.
just curious whether there was anything
Okay.
that the kind of the history of what you've done.
Yeah. So I think technology in terms of how young people make music has always been central to, what youth music supports. So many of the sessions are utilizing technology in a variety of ways, and I think that's a really good thing. So the fact that a young person, it might just be in their bedroom to start with, can get online and learn and make, amazing, and that's becoming increasingly sophisticated. There's downsides to that in terms of the safeguarding of young people, that we're doing a lot about that in terms of how they're looked after, what happens online, and all those kind of things. And I think also that sense that technology can be really, really good, but there's also that getting beyond that and getting out and being with people as well,
Mm,
so that you can put that into a sort of setting where you're making music with others. So, technology as a tool has meant that young people can get engaged quicker, but I think it's probably not as fulfilling as it could be if they combine that with actually being in places, the youth spaces where they can make music with
mm,
others. So I think that's one thing. Um, I think from a music education point of view, the music education sector of music in schools, things like that, I think there's an opportunity to embrace this scene, this technology scene, more in music departments, really responding to what young people are doing at home. How could that curriculum become more diverse, responding to young people's needs more than being told this is the music we're telling you that you should like? It sounds like a very traditional thing to say, but there can be situations where young people are loving music, but actually what they're hearing about music should be in schools doesn't rock their boat. And
yeah,
technology is a great way for
I
them.
had far too many teachers who were obsessed with the Beatles and not the good bits.
Right. I'm a percussionist by training, and yeah, it's vivid, isn't it, Sean, what you remember? But like,
Mm,
yeah, and I had to do orchestras and all that stuff. But I had this teacher who was just obsessed with saying we're going to do 4 bars of timpani from a Beethoven symphony, and he obsessed on it for two
mm,
hours, and it was like maybe 4 or 5 notes, and how I was hitting the drum, and actually, it was a really restrictive experience. Do you know what I mean? But he, as the percussion teacher, felt that was music.
mm.
And I was much more at home, setting my drum kit up, getting people around the house, making some noise. And that's how I kind of found my place,
Yeah.
really.
You just reminded me of a beautiful essay I read a few years ago, from an English teacher in the South in America somewhere who taught Shakespeare using Little Wayne. And
Yeah,
he went from just listening to the students playing this music he didn't quite get to them becoming a huge Little Wayne fan and like really loving his poetry. And it was like this, it was just like one of those really nice experiences of a teacher thinking, well, we're going to teach Shakespeare. Like, how can we find a
yeah.
way in for the students? And the yeah, I think there's probably a lot of legacy to like how we do things that probably needs a bit of a shake up too, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and start where young people are at, if you see what I mean. And yes, broaden horizons, and they'll be working with technology that they might have done at home, and describe how that can be fused and mixed up with some live stuff, with a brass section, whatever. That's a teacher's role. And enhancing your song, that's probably not always going to be done best by tech to make it that banger tune, but dynamics, tone, and all those things, they definitely have a place where you need to be with others and out of your soul bedroom kind of thing. So I think, yeah, but overall, the developments of tech, um, positive, but the financial model for, the future of AI like most people and like most of the people in this space, is a big concern. But surely there's a way to license. You opt in rather than you opt out to get a fee as a result of this work. Because the idea that anyone's music can just be nicked and used just sounds atrocious.
So, as an AI summary of this conversation, then community and humanity are the two things that we should prioritize in the future.
Love that.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Drown in Sound podcast. I got a lot out of that conversation. I probably talked a lot more than I did in the previous series between questions, because I feel like there's a lot more I've got to say and think and feel through this topic. And I realised that a few places there I asked some questions which didn't necessarily get answered because I asked about 3 different questions in one. But yeah, I think my big takeaways were the importance and the value of community. I've always known that. Drown in Sound's forums have obviously been a real key component of our music scene's community. And that's not something that can be measured in terms of GDP, like gross domestic product, which is how governments measure the success of the economy and how big business work out how well they're doing. It's like the profit of the country. And I'm really starting to feel increasingly like you can't just monetize everything. And I think we see that on social platforms. You don't necessarily make the most valuable thing that needs to be in the world at that moment, like public safety information around a disaster. That's not something that you're going to monetize and put ads alongside and try and make money out of. And yet people do. It's why people are transitioning their audiences from social platforms to their courses, because people value their knowledge and the information that they're sharing. And I think that you could put all of your music directly up onto a social platform and people could stream it, but you wouldn't make any money. So you've kind of got to only put the teasers up and the bits up. And I think a lot of this sense of monetizing everything is a theme I think we'll get into a lot more across this series. I really liked the way that Matt talked about music not being a pipeline but a flight pathway. I think that's a really beautiful way of thinking about it, and how you don't always think about things going in necessarily, but as things flowing out. And I think one of the big things I see in a lot of the reports into the music industry is how much value music has as an export. So maybe we'll go a bit more into that in this series, if that's something that people think might be interesting. I was also quite scared by the fact that he said that 25% of their portfolio is at risk, and possibly by the time you've heard this, their roots, I'll put the link in the description to their campaign that's coming out. I think it's February, and they're going to be match funding any donations people are making. So if you felt quite moved by that conversation and you want to support youth music or some of the organizations that they support, I really urge you just to dig into what they're doing, join their mailing list, follow them on Instagram, all those kind of things. But I really also liked the line that what they're doing is fundamentally about social change and social justice. Surely that's something all people can coalesce around, young people having those two things. I think that's social change is obviously a big thing, but that comes from us, the people. And social justice is something which we would hope that the governments we elect are trying to have for everybody. So yeah, I'll also drop in the description the essay I talked about Lil Wayne, just because I think it's such a beautiful piece of writing as much as a really lovely idea. It's from the Oxford American. But right, that's the first episode of the series done. Up next week, my conversation with climate activist Francis Fox. This series, I'm going to probably put all the episodes out on Sundays. I'd love to get your feedback. You can just email me, Sean, SEAN, @drowningsound.org. Or you can find me online. Like, I'm going to be sharing these episodes across my social channels and across Drowning Sounds. Obviously, you can go to community.drowningsound.com. That's where hundreds of people chat all day, every day, millions of page views a month. One of the last outposts on the internet. And I promise that I'm not putting the money, the no money that we make from our forums into Trump's inauguration or anything like that. Anyway, I've recorded this outro on my phone, and I'm probably going to discover the recording quality is not good enough. But hopefully you can hear me and understand me. But if I have to record it again, I have to record it again. Anyway, this is the Drown in Sound podcast. I'm Sean Adams. I hosted this show. I produced this show. And on the first episode, you heard some wonderful music by Sound Mirror, which I'm going to bring into some of the other episodes. Her work's great, and I'd recommend you go look up some of the things that she's doing. You can book her for sound baths and all sorts of things. So she's called Sound Mirror. Head to drownandsound.org, join the mailing list if you've not already. I'm not going to say hit subscribe or smash the subscribe button. Take your mouse and really gently press the subscribe button. I'll take your finger and really lightly press it on the subscribe button. Do those 5 stars things and all that stuff if you really would like a few more people to hear this, because I think that was a really important conversation. WhatsApp it to the one friend you think might find this enlightening. That's all for now. Bye.